In this lesson, we'll be reviewing the concept of negative numbers. The main thing we'll need to remember to be able to do this is that the number line can be extended. We're quite used to the positive number line starting at 0 and going upwards to the right, and of course it can also be extended back the other way and counting upwards to the left, but the counting upwards here has the negative signs in front of it, and in fact all the numbers up this end are higher and all the numbers down this end are lower. And so if the number's got the negative sign in front of it, the larger the number, the actual lower its value. So -7 has a lower value than -4. So the further you go along this way, the higher the value gets, and the further you go down that way, the lower the value gets. Okay, let's take a look at some additions and subtractions involving negatives, and we'll start with 1, take away 4. So we start up here at 1, and then we go backwards 4 because we're subtracting 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can see we end up at -3. So the answer is -3. Let's think of a strategy though that we could do that doesn't involve the number line, because what we can see is happening here is no matter what number we start at, that's how many we have to go back to get to 0. So I started at number 1 here, it only took 1 to get to 0. If I started at number 5, it would take 5 to get to 0. And then all I have to work out is how many are left over. So once I've already traveled 1, how many of the 4 are left over? Well, in this case it's 3. That's how many you're going to travel beyond the 0 and into the negatives. And so when you're subtracting a bigger number of positive, you're really asking yourself, how much beyond the 0 are you going to go? You know that you've got to travel this far to start with, and so that takes up one of these 4. And so how many are left over? And it's 3. So we traveled 3 beyond the 0, so it was -3. The next one has us subtracting a number from a negative. So we're starting here at -2, and again it's subtraction, so we're going down, and so we're going to go back 3. 1, 2, 3. And so the answer is -5. Now notice in this case we started in the negatives, and because we're subtracting, we're just going to go further negative. And so if I'm at -2 and I go back another 3, well, I'm going to be going -2, 3, 4, 5. And so I end up at -5. And so when you're subtracting a negative from a negative, the question is, we're starting in the negatives and we're going further into the negatives, and so how far in do we end up? And so if I started at -2 and I go another 3 into the negatives, I end up at -5. This time we're going to be adding to a negative, and so I'm going to start here at -2. I've got to go up 6, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because I'm traveling in that direction because it's adding, of course, and I ended up at 4. And so what's happening here is wherever we start this -2, it takes that many to get up to the 0. So it doesn't matter where we start. -2, it'll take 2 to get up to the 0. -5, it would take 5 to get up to the 0. And so again, the question ends up, what's left over? If I've already traveled 2 out of my 6, how many is left over? Whatever that number is, that's how far into the positives I will end up going, and so that's why it's 4. So if we're adding to a negative, we got to think, how far is it to 0? And it's always, it's going to be basically this number here, the 2 in this case. How far is it to the 0? And then, well, what's left over? How much further do we get after the 0 once I've already used 2 of whatever I'm adding? And that's how I know I end up at 4. Now, it's good to look at another one where we're adding to a negative, and this is -5 plus 3. So I'm starting down here at -5, and I'm adding 3, so I'm going in this direction, 1, 2, 3. I end up at -2. So -5 plus 3 is 2. Now notice this time I didn't actually get to the 0. So if this number here, the 5, if when I'm adding that, there's not enough to get me to 0, and if we sort of ignore the negative for a moment, 5 is bigger than 3, that's how I know I'm not going to get to the 0. We've got to work out, well, how far away will we still be? And so really what's happening is I'm using up 3 of my 5 here. And that's why there's 2 left over, and I'm still in the negatives, so it's -2. So I'm down here at -5, and I'm this far away from 0. Well, I'm using up 3 of them, and so that's why I end up at -2. So if we don't get to the 0, we're really just working out, well, how far away from the 0 are we still at that point? Now what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of our number line because we don't want to get reliant on the number line. Just going to get rid of it, and we're going to take those strategies and we're going to put them up the top here. Now you may not need even these strategies. You may already be very good at adding and subtracting when it involves negative numbers. For some people it just comes very quickly. Other people need some strategies to work through when they're doing it. But if you're having trouble, remember these are the way that we want to think about it. We don't want to be counting up and down a number line anymore. So our first example, we're going to evaluate -3 plus 5. And so this is one of those ones where I'm adding to a negative. And so I'm currently -3 below 0. So it's going to take 3 to get up to 0. And then how many more have I got left to go? Well, I've got 2. So -3 plus 5 is equal to 2. Notice I can just write down the question equals the answer. There's no other working there. And the next example is 5 take away 7. So this is one of those ones where I'm taking a bigger number from a positive. And so it's going to take me 5 to get down to 0 because I'm subtracting. And so I've used up 5. How much is left over? There's 2. So that means it's going to keep going another 2. So I'll end up at -2. So once again, question equals the answer. No other working needed. And on the next example, this time we're doing -3 take away 4. So this is one of those when we're subtracting a negative from a negative. So we're at -3, we're already below 0, and we're going to go further away from 0 because we're minusing. And so if I'm at -3 and I go back another 4, then I've got to get 3 more away from 0. So that's going to end up at 7. So 3, if I count, that's 4, 5, 6, 7. And so I end up at -7 because I'm -7 away from 0. And so again, just write down the question equals the answer. The next one is a little bit different. This time we have to find the missing number in here. So it's almost like they're giving us the answer and we got to work out what the question would be. So 4 take away something gets me to -3. And so well, I'm subtracting here and I've got to end up at -3. So I'm starting in a positive, which means I'm going to have to make it to 0. So I'd have to subtract 4 to start with, wouldn't I, to go from 4 back to 0. So I've already subtracted 4, and then I need to go another 3 to get all the way back to -3. And so I moved 4 to get back to the 0 and another 3 to get down to -3. So in total I must have subtracted 7. Now notice when I wrote this one down with the question, I put the box there as well. That's just so that you know what answer you're checking. So you should do that as well. You should write out the whole question with the box there, put your number inside the box. That way if you look back at it later, it's not confusing and you're not sure, wait, well, what number did I work out? Was it the 4, the 7, the 3? I'm not sure. If the box is there, then you're sure. And the next one, this time we've got a couple of additions and subtractions. We're going 3 take away 5 plus 7. And the way we're going to do this is we're just going to work left to right. And so we're going to go 3 take away 5 first, and then we're going to add 7. But we're not all going to do all that in our head. We're going to start by writing down the question, and we're going to take away 3. We're going to do 3 take away 5. We're going to work that out using the same strategies we did up there. So 3 take away 5 gets me -2. And so I write down the -2, and then I still write down the +7 because I haven't done anything to that yet. So that just stays there. And then I go, so -2 plus 7, again using my strategies up there, will give me 5. And so I end up at 5. Now, notice that these ones, I put the equals and the answer was just next to it. That's because it was just question equals the answer, and that's fine. There's no problem in doing that. With this one though, I had to show working, and so I had to show step by step, and we always show that downwards, remember. We don't want multiple equal signs on the same line as I go across. So unless I'm going straight to my answer, I should always work down the page. Okay, it's time to try some practice questions with this. Remember to pause the video until you are ready to see the answers. And there they are. So 3 questions where it was really just write down the question, write down the answer. 1 question where you had to show a bit of working going down the page. Okay, going through those now. With this first one, we started at -4. And then I was adding 7. So it took me 4, because I'm adding and going towards 0, it took me 4 to get back to 0 again. And so I've used up 4 of the 7. How many's left over? It's 3. So that means I'd go 3 beyond 0. So my answer is +3. With our second one here, I'm at -1 and I'm going back another 2. So I'm moving away from 0 because I'm minusing here. I'm already in the negatives. I'm minusing, I'm going to go another 2 into the negatives, so that means in total I end up down at -3. With this 1c here, when we write it out and we put our box there and we have to work out what goes inside it, I'm currently at -2. I have to add something to end up at +3, so I'm going to have to go up past 0 and keep going up to +3. So because I'm at -2, that means it takes me 2 to get up to 0, and then I want to get up to 3, so that's another 3. So I go up 2 and then another 3. In total I've gone up 5. And then finally with this one here, I wrote down the question to start with, and then I did these guys first, because remember we always go left to right. So -2 minus 1 first is -3, and I just wrote down the +8 because I hadn't done anything to it, so I just wrote it down from the line above, and then I can do -3 plus 8, and I get 5. Again, doing the pluses and minus there's using the strategies up the top. Okay, here's some more practice questions. If you needed to try one or more of them again, remember to pause the video. And there are the solutions to these ones. Hopefully, if you had trouble last time, then you've got it right this time. But if not, remember to seek some extra help. And that is the end of the lesson.